Hi, welcome to the Chamber's Connect with Careers Week. Thank you to our sponsors, Capcom Federal Credit Union and Hoosick Valley Contractors. I'm Kate Manley, president of the Rensselaer County Regional Chamber of Commerce and host for your Connect with Careers Week. Today, we're joined by Peter Mueller, who's the Director of Technology Operations at Ecovative. Peter, welcome.
Hi, Kate. Thanks. Great to be with you today.
So your title, let's jump right into it, is Director of Technology Operations. So can you talk a little bit about what that role is and maybe about Ecovative overall as a company?
Sure, be glad to. So Ecovative is a biomaterials research company. We specialize in fungal materials, so that's mushrooms, and all of the cool technologies that you can create with mushrooms. My role as Director of Technology Operations is kind of akin to maybe the pilot of a ship, where the captain of the ship is more of our CEO. So the captain is the person who says, that's the direction we want to head as a company, sees the vision, has the plan for the trajectory. And my role is about keeping the organization running, making sure everybody who has various jobs around the organization understands how their job is going to allow us to get to that position. And also taking a lot of input from the team to understand, is there an iceberg in our way that we didn't realize when we first set out, and how are we going to navigate around that?
That's an awesome analogy for that. Can you share a little bit about some of the products that you have developed? Because I think our students would be really interested in hearing about that.
Absolutely. So Ecovative was really spawned out of a college class in 2007 at RPI around the concept of using mycelium, which is the root structure of mushrooms, or the vegetative tissue of mushrooms, to bind together agricultural particles, meaning pieces of corn stalk or pieces of cotton fiber, into a packaging material. So we can replace styrofoam, which doesn't really break down in the environment, with a totally biological composite that breaks down within a couple of years. So that packaging material was really the first product that spawned the company as Ecovative. And was the first several years, probably the first 5 years of Ecovative's tech journey was focused on that. Since then, we've explored other things that you can do with mushroom tissue, with mycelium tissue. So we explored taking the pure mycelium tissue, which is just kind of a squishy, soft, foam-like material, and compressing that, and you can actually turn it into a leather alternative. So leather is another product that has a real ecological toll on our planet in terms of production. And this was a way to make something in only 14 days, as opposed to how long it takes to grow a cow. That is also completely biodegradable, unlike a lot of plastics, which leather alternatives are usually made out of plastic. Right. And then the latest technology that we're working on is a meat alternative. So we can take that same slab of mycelium tissue, which is much larger and kind of more uniform than a mushroom you might get in the grocery store, and you can turn it into, everybody's seen the Impossible Burger, the Beyond sausages. Right. We're looking at making a bacon product, and we're actually bringing that to market very soon. It's a mushroom-based bacon alternative out of that material.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. So when you look back, like if you were a high school student and your pathway from there till now, what did your pathway look like? Did you always know you were going to end up in this role?
So from, I think, a very young age, I've always loved the idea of being an inventor. And so I've really always been drawn to really innovative companies and innovative spaces. I certainly didn't imagine I would end up in the role I'm in today. So I went to school for mechanical engineering, and that's what I studied in college. And my first job was actually at a plastics company in their research group as an engineer on the innovation side. When I got into Ecovative, I took on more and more kind of leadership responsibilities for projects, leading teams, leading through projects, and really found a new side of myself, I guess I would say, around people leadership. And I found that side of the work that I do today, and what my new role is just as fulfilling as the technical side was that I originally thought would pretty much be my career from start to finish.
That's awesome. So when you talk about skills, you talked a little bit about the technical and then the people skills. What are some of the skills that you use on a daily basis in working with your teams?
Yeah, so emotional intelligence, if the listeners have heard that phrase, is absolutely huge. And that's the ability to really understand the person that you're talking to, the team that you're working with, what motivates people, what mental space are they in when they're coming to a meeting? How can you phrase challenges in a way that engages the team as a way to, instead of maybe threatening or posing a challenge that feels overwhelming. So emotional intelligence is really a huge one, and there's a lot of different ways you can build that skill, both through classes, through coursework, as well as through kind of personal development. Self-discipline is one as well. So my job does require handling a lot of things simultaneously, and it's really easy to lose something. It's really easy to drop a task. It's really easy to have an email kind of fall off and not get back to it. And so self-discipline is a skill that I really rely a lot on. And then there's the kind of more intellectual side of things. So critical thinking, the ability to hold multiple potential truths in your head at the same time and work that way for months. Maybe you don't find the answer out to something that could really change a pathway or a strategy for several months. And so you have to work under both of those potential options being true. And so that's a real critical thinking competency. And then there's also the kind of scientific engineering background, which is really just a fundamental basis that you need to have.
That's terrific. So when we're talking about like different types of career pathways, perhaps in your industry, where can people go if they have an interest or if they're looking to work at Ecovative? What kind of roles could they participate in?
Yeah, there's a lot of different pathways to get to Ecovative. So I really love that question. In biotech, generally, you meet people. There are people on our team who come from all kinds of backgrounds. Some of them come from the traditional manufacturing sector. And when they join our team, they learn about science and they learn about the scientific process and the discipline of science and how that applies. Some people are biologists by training. Maybe they studied ecology. Maybe they studied some form of biology. Plant biology is a really popular one. When they get to our team, have to learn what it means to work in industry. So academic biology is very different than industrial biology. In industry, we make all kinds of bets. We don't really know the full answer all the time, and we're always, making our best attempt, and that's very different from the way biology is taught as a curriculum. Some people like myself come from a tech background, where maybe they're coming from a plastics industry and they need to learn biology. So I didn't really know in my coursework any biology. We even have some people on the team who had an art background, who got their BFA in fine arts, later in life discovered a passion for fungus, growing mushrooms themselves, and worked their way to Ecovative. There are some roles on the team, especially in our kind of more advanced research foundry side, that really do require a specific background, particularly microbiology. So the scientific track there has a little bit more rigor in terms of what's required. But there are all kinds of roles on the team that you can get into from a number of different backgrounds, and those could be HR, finance. These are other disciplines that once you know you're going to be a finance person, then you can say, well, what kind of a company do I want to work for? And so maybe you can attach yourself to Ecovative without having any biological background at all.
That's awesome. A lot of different entry points and ways to get involved. So when we talk about this past year and the pandemic, how has Ecovative been affected by that overall from a company standpoint, and even just your role in and of itself?
Yeah, so obviously you can see I'm here at home, which is not something that would have been true a year ago. We really did feel as a company that it was important to have everybody in the building talking to each other every day prior to this pandemic. And, in hindsight, we've been able to put these tools in place. We've been able to really embrace distance communication tools so that probably about 25% of our team is predominantly working from home. Another 50% of our team flexes back and forth depending on where the work is. So they might be in 1 day a week, 2 days a week, 3 days a week, and then home for the rest of the time. And then we have a core operations team, which really keeps our infrastructure and our systems running. And they're there every day still. But that has been a huge transformation. It's been a challenge. How do you keep the people who show up every day connected to the people who only show up once every couple of weeks? And so it's been a cultural challenge for the team. I would also say that as good as Zoom is, it's definitely got, it's not all gravy. It's got some drawbacks. And I think obviously the students who are dealing with distance learning probably know this full well. It's exhausting being on Zoom calls all day. It's very different from being in an office environment where you can actually interact with peers. It really limits our incidental contact with each other. So if I'm sitting in an office and I overhear a conversation, I might perk up. I might say, hey, wait a second, I just heard somebody else talking about that. You guys should all get together. And we just short-circuited what could have been, a really messy situation where two groups are working in two different areas. And so as a team, we've had to think really critically about how do we make that happen? We have collaboration groups where we assemble random people from the company and get together and talk about what's going on in their world. And so we have to be a lot more intentional about communication in this world.
Absolutely. Communication is critical, which is a skill that we all, if we weren't doing before, which most of us were, has really taken a front seat to these times. One of our students had asked the question that I posed to you: how do you define success, and what does success mean to you?
So personally, for me, I've always really attached to this concept. I'm not sure where the origin of it is, but that an individual trying to live a fulfilling life, right, should look at kind of three different categories, right? And that is like, what provides income? What can I do that makes me financially stable and secure? What provides creative outlet? And then what provides, physical activity, right? Like that having some form of, sport or a passion there, because they really do drive each other, right? Like there's a lot of research that shows that physical activity actually increases your mental capacity significantly. So for me, success in my life is like having a balance of all of those. And I'm fortunate to get two of them in a job together, which is my creativity I can really exercise at work. And obviously that's where I get my financial security from. And so then I just have to find the one outside of work. Some people find all three in the same job in their lives, and that's fantastic. Some people have a different hobby outside of work that gives them, maybe all three are in different places. So my personal success, my own philosophy is just like trying to find that balance in my life. In terms of the company, obviously each corporate organization has metrics of success. It's a thing we spend a lot of time talking about. We do strategic retreats where the leadership team will get together and we'll ask ourselves that question: what are we going to define success as for the next 5 years? And that practice is certainly a practice that I would encourage anybody to do for their own lives. To say to yourself, how am I going to define success? It really is, in a lot of ways, up to you to kind of answer that question for yourself.
That's awesome. So you talked a little bit about being an inventor or being creative. So what would you tell a student that was looking to, go down that path of inventing something or creating something? What advice would you give them?
Definitely so one piece of advice would be don't go it alone, or don't feel you have to go it alone. There's a lot of thought that has gone into this. There are classes. The course that I took at RPI was the program was actually all about inventorship. So it's product design and innovation, and it's an entire college program about how do you innovate and invent and create new ideas. And so certainly don't feel like you have to figure out the answer to that yourself. There are disciplines, there are great resources on how to pursue that. On a personal note, on the creativity side, so I actually I've always been really drawn to painting, and that's kind of my other half of my creative side is being artistic there. And even to the point that I took a year off between my job in the plastics industry and joining Ecovative to see if I wanted to actually pursue painting professionally. And I found during that time that I missed engineering. I missed being at the cutting edge of technology. I was reading articles in Scientific American and saying, why am I not involved in this? This is fascinating. And so that drew me back and gave me the confidence to say, this really is what I want to do with my career. But I think the learning there is give yourself the opportunity, as much as you're able to try different things. Give yourself the opportunity to step into a different role and say, is this right for me? Kind of give yourself as many chances as you can. Inventorship, innovation, entrepreneurship is full of failure. And so if that's the path that you want and you're going to explore that, you have to be ready to try things and say, you know what, I didn't want to be a professional artist. That wasn't right for me. And so I pivoted.
That's terrific. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And I know that our students will probably have more questions and follow up from these. So we'll be able to connect you with them, hopefully live as well. But thank you so much for joining us today, Peter.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.